The starship USS Endeavour drifted slowly toward the massive space station. Its silver hull shone in the light of the nearby star. Captain Samantha Collins stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. She watched as the alien station grew larger on the main screen. "Are we ready for this?" she asked, not turning around. "As ready as we'll ever be," said Lieutenant Christopher Allen from the security station. His uniform was perfect, not a wrinkle in sight. First contact with the Viridian Alliance. Earth has been waiting for this day for years. Communications. Officer Maria Rodriguez tapped at her console. "Captain, we're receiving docking instructions. They're welcoming us in their language and in English." "Good," said Captain Collins. "Acknowledge and follow their guidance. Where's Foster?" "Engineering, as usual," said Lieutenant Allen with a small smile. "Should I call him up?" "Yes. He needs to be here for the welcoming party." 5 minutes later, Engineer Alan Foster stepped onto the bridge. He was average in every way. Average height, average build, with brown hair cut short and simple clothes under his engineering jacket. His eyes, though, were different. They moved constantly, taking in every detail, missing nothing. "You called. For me, Captain." His voice was soft but clear. "Yes, Alan, we're about to dock with the Viridian station. As our chief engineer, you'll be part of the first meeting." Alan nodded once. He didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. The USS Endeavour docked smoothly with the alien station. Captain Collins led her team through the airlock. Lieutenant Allen walked with his hand near his sidearm. Maria Rodriguez carried translation devices. Alan Foster came last, looking at everything with careful eyes. The Viridians waited for them in a large room with high ceilings. They were tall beings, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were large and dark, set in faces with no noses, just breathing slits. Ambassador Zexteral stepped forward, all 4 hands open in a gesture of peace. "Welcome, humans of Earth," he said, his voice translated by Maria's devices. "We are pleased to finally meet your species in person." Captain Collins smiled and bowed, slightly. "The pleasure is ours, Ambassador. We bring greetings from Earth and hope for a friendship between our peoples." The formal introductions continued. Captain Collins was confident and friendly. Lieutenant Allen was stiff but polite. Maria Rodriguez charmed the aliens with her attempt to speak a few words in their language. Alan Foster said almost nothing, just nodded and shook hands when introduced. One of the Viridians, a security officer named Krell, watched Alan with suspicion. "And what is your function, quiet human?" he asked. "I fix things," Alan said simply. The Viridians showed the humans to their quarters, then invited them to a welcome feast. The dining hall was filled with strange foods and alien delegates from all 5 species of the Viridian Alliance. Music played from hidden speakers, and the lights changed colors slowly. Captain Collins and Ambassador Zexteral sat at the main table, discussing trade possibilities and cultural exchange. Lieutenant Allen talked with the Viridian security team about weapons technology. Maria moved from table to table, learning new words and making everyone laugh. Alan sat quietly, eating little, watching everything. He noticed how the different alien species interacted. He saw which ones seemed more important than others. He watched the servants and the guards. When someone asked him a question, he answered politely but briefly. "Your engineer doesn't talk much," Ambassador Zexteral said to Captain Collins. "Alan? No, he's always been quiet. But he's the best engineer I've ever worked with. There's nothing he can't fix or improve." The ambassador nodded. "Interesting. In our experience, humans are usually more expressive." "Most are," agreed the captain. "But not all of us." Later in the evening, a minor problem occurred. The temperature control system in the dining hall malfunctioned, making the room uncomfortably hot for both humans and Viridians. The alien technicians worked on the control panel, arguing among themselves. Without a word, Alan stood up and walked over. He watched for a minute, then pointed to something inside the panel. The lead technician looked where he pointed, made an adjustment, and the temperature began to drop immediately. "How did you know?" asked the technician. Alan shrugged. "Similar system to ours. Different symbols. Same logic. Krell, the security officer, narrowed his eyes. You understood our technology that quickly? I observe, Alan said. It's not so different. The feast continued, but now more Viridians paid attention to the quiet human engineer. They had expected the captain or the security officer to be the ones to watch, not this silent man who seemed, to fade into the background. After the meal, Ambassador Zextoril suggested a tour of the station. As they walked, he explained the history of the Viridian Alliance, how 5 different species had come together to form a peaceful coalition. And you have never had war among yourselves? Asked Lieutenant Allen. Oh, we had many wars, said the ambassador. Centuries of conflict before we learned better. Your species is young, still learning. Some among us worry that humans advance too quickly without the wisdom to match. Lanaus Allen stiffened. We've learned plenty from our mistakes. Have you? Another Viridian official joined the conversation. Your planet still has conflicts. Your technology grows faster than your ability to control it. Some say humans are dangerous. Captain Collins stepped forward. We've made great progress in recent decades. Peace is our goal. The official made a dismissive gesture. Easy to say. We've seen other young species burn brightly then destroy themselves. Humans are emotional, impulsive. Claire Allen's face flushed with anger. Maria Rodriguez began to argue. Captain Collins maintained her diplomatic smile, but her eyes flashed. Alan Foster said nothing. He watched the official's body language. He noted which other Viridians seemed to agree and which looked uncomfortable. He filed away every detail for later. The tour ended at a large observation deck overlooking the stars. Ambassador Zextoril apologized for his colleague's rudeness and promised more productive talks tomorrow. As the humans returned to their quarters, Captain Collins said, "That could have gone better." "They're testing us," said Lieutenant Allen. "Trying to provoke a reaction." Maria nodded. "I picked up some undertones in their language. They're split on whether to trust us." Allen said nothing. Later that night, when the others were asleep, Allen sat at the small desk in his room. He wrote notes about everything he had seen, the station layout, the technology, the relationships between different aliens. He drew diagrams and listed questions. In the station's security center, Krell reviewed the recordings of the humans. "Watch that one," he told his assistant, pointing to Alan. "The quiet one." "Why? He barely speaks." "Exactly," said Krell. "The others show us everything, their anger, their pride, their hopes. But that one, he watches, he listens, he reveals nothing." In his private chamber, Ambassador Zextoril received Krell's report. "You think the quiet human is a threat?" "Think," said Krell, "that we need to learn more about him. Tomorrow we test them all." The next morning, alarms blared through the Viridian space station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. The human delegation rushed out of their quarters to find Viridian security officers waiting. "What's happening?" asked Captain Collins, her voice sharp with concern. "Security breach," said Krell, the head of security. "Someone accessed restricted files during the night. The data signature points to human technology." Lieutenant Allen stepped forward. "That's impossible. None of us would—" "Evidence says otherwise," Krell interrupted. "We need to search your quarters and equipment." Captain Collins frowned but nodded. "We have nothing to hide." The Viridians searched their rooms thoroughly. From Maria's translator to Vice, they pulled what looked like Viridian data codes. From Lieutenant Allen's personal computer, they found access attempts to the station's security grid. "This is a setup," Allen shouted. "We didn't do this." Ambassador Zextoril arrived, his face grim. "I am sorry, Captain Collins, but the evidence is concerning. We must suspend negotiations until we investigate fully." "We are innocent," said Collins firmly. "Someone is trying to sabotage our meeting." "Perhaps," said the ambassador. "But we must follow protocol. Your ship will remain docked, but under guard. Your crew will be questioned separately." Alan Foster stood quietly through all of this. His eyes moved from the evidence to the Viridian security team, noting small details others missed. How the data was arranged too perfectly. How Krell seemed unsurprised by what they found. "And what about you, Engineer Foster?" Krell turned to Alan. "You have been very quiet." "Nothing to say," Alan replied simply. "We didn't do this. The humans were separated." Captain Collins was taken to diplomatic quarters, still technically a guest but unable to contact her ship. Lieutenant Allen was placed under guard in a security holding area, his protests growing louder by the hour. Maria Rodriguez was moved to the communications center where specialists questioned her about Earth transmission codes. Alan Foster was taken to a small, bare room deep in the station's engineering section. The Viridians considered him the highest risk due to his technical knowledge. They placed him under the heaviest security, with 3 guards and constant monitoring. For 3 days, they questioned him about Earth technology and his background. Alan answered simply and directly, never volunteering more information than asked. When not being questioned, he sat on his bed, eyes closed, seemingly resigned to his situation. The guards grew more relaxed around him. The quiet humans seemed harmless. On the 4th day, the environmental system in that section of the station began to malfunction. The temperature dropped, and the air circulation weakened. "Can you fix it?" the senior guard asked Alan after the Viridian technicians failed to solve the problem. Alan nodded. "I can try. Need tools." They gave him basic tools and access to the environmental control panel. Under their watch, Alan worked silently, his hands moving with practiced skill. The guards didn't notice how he studied the control circuits, memorizing how they connected to other systems. They didn't see him slip a small component into his pocket when the lights flickered briefly. "Fixed," he said after an hour. The temperature returned to normal, and the air flowed properly again. "What was wrong with it?" asked one guard. "Power relay was inverted," Alan said. "Simple mistake." That night, Alan sat on his bed, apparently meditating. In reality, he was using the component he had taken to create a small device from parts in his room. A clock timer, a light fixture, pieces of his own translator. When the guards changed shifts and the monitoring was briefly less focused, he placed the device inside the room's control panel. Meanwhile, across the station, Captain Collins worked through diplomatic channels, protesting their treatment. Latier. Alan threatened military response from Earth if they weren't released. Both approaches only made the Viridians more suspicious. On the 5th day, Alan asked the guards about their technology and culture. He seemed genuinely interested, and his quiet, respectful questions made them relax even more. They began to talk, freely around him, mentioning things they shouldn't: shift changes, security protocols, the location of the central computer hub. "You are not like the others," said the youngest guard. "They shout and threaten. You listen." Alan nodded. "Different approaches, same goal." Late that night, Alan's device activated, creating a small power fluctuation that reset the door lock on his room for 3 seconds. It was enough. He slipped out into the corridor, moving silently through the dimly lit station. Using what he had learned from the guards' conversations, he avoided security patrols. He reached a maintenance shaft and climbed inside, following the power conduits deeper into the station. He had memorized the station layout from his observations during the tour. At the same time, unknown to the humans, a group of Viridian extremists put their plan into action. They opposed any alliance with humans, believing the new species would bring chaos to their stable society. They had framed the humans for data theft and now moved to eliminate them completely, planning to make it look like the humans had tried to escape and been killed resisting capture. Alan emerged from the maintenance shaft near the central computer hub. He needed access to prove the humans' innocence, but as he approached, he heard unfamiliar voices, Viridians arguing in low, tense tones. "The explosives are set," said one voice. "When they detonate, the human ship will be destroyed and their delegation eliminated." "What about our people nearby?" asked another. "Acceptable losses to prevent a human alliance," replied the first. "The High Council will believe it was a human weapon malfunction." Alan froze. processing this new information. His original plan had been to clear their names, but now he needed to prevent an attack. He backed away silently, thinking quickly. He made his way to a communication terminal in an empty office. Using the access codes he had memorized from watching the guards, he bypassed the basic security. He couldn't reach Earth or the Endeavor, but he could send a message within the station. He sent a simple text to Captain Collins' terminal. Framed by extremists. Ship in danger. Need evidence. Working. On plan. Then he headed toward the power distribution center, gathering materials along the way. Cleaning solutions. Medical supplies. Tools from unlocked maintenance cabinets. Others might see random items, but Alan saw components. In the shadows of the station, Alan worked quickly, building small devices from the materials he had gathered. As a Viridian security patrol passed, he remained perfectly still, controlling even his breathing. They walked past without noticing him. The extremists were moving into position. Their leader, a high-ranking official named Verex, had orchestrated everything. He had never trusted humans and now had the perfect opportunity to eliminate the threat they posed. His team spread throughout the station, ready to strike. What they didn't expect was the quiet human engineer who had spent days watching, listening, and planning. While Captain Collins argued with ambassadors and Lieutenant Allen confronted guards, Alan Foster moved through the shadows with his improvised tools, preparing to save them all. Krell, the security chief, reviewed the monitor logs and noticed Alan's empty room. He sounded the alarm, but it was too late. The quiet human was already 10 steps ahead, setting a trap for those who had underestimated him. Alarms blared throughout the Viridian station. Prisoner escape, human engineer missing. The announcement repeated in multiple languages. Security teams rushed through corridors, weapons ready. They checked every room, every maintenance shaft. But Alan Foster was like a ghost, moving between search parties, using his knowledge of the station layout to stay hidden. In her guarded quarters, Captain Collins received Alan's message. She immediately contacted Ambassador Zexatoril. "Ambassador, you need to listen," she said urgently. "There are extremists on your station planning to destroy our ship." The ambassador looked skeptical. "And how would you know this?" "My engineer discovered it. The same people who framed us are planning an attack." "Your engineer who has escaped custody?" The ambassador shook his head. "This sounds like a distraction." In the security holding area, Lieutenant Allen heard the alarms and smiled. "Good for you, Foster," he muttered. Meanwhile, Allen had reached the main power distribution center. It was a large room filled with humming equipment and glowing control panels. 2 guards stood at the entrance, alert and nervous after the escape announcement. Allen waited patiently in a service duct above them, watching their movements. After 15 minutes, one guard received a call and left to join a search team. The moment the remaining guard turned to check a monitor, Allen dropped silently to the floor and moved behind a large power transformer. He worked quickly, connecting the devices he had built to specific power junctions. Each device was simple, timer circuits connected to power modulators made from medical equipment and cleaning chemicals. Not bombs, but disruptors that would cause targeted power failures in key areas of the station. "Hey!" The guard had spotted him. He raised his weapon. "Don't move." Allen raised his hands slowly. "No trouble," he said calmly. "Listen to me. Extremists planning attack. Need to stop them. Shut up and get on the ground." The guard approached, cautiously, weapon aimed at Allen's chest. Allen did as he was told, keeping his eyes on the guard. "Check the explosive residue in Cargo Bay 4, he said. "Check security logs from 2 nights ago between midnight and 2 a.m. Someone erased them." The guard hesitated, confused by Allen's calm confidence. At that moment, Allen's first device activated. The lights in the corridor outside flickered and went out. The guard turned instinctively toward the door and Allen moved. In one smooth motion, he swept the guard's legs out from under him. The weapon clattered to the floor. Before the guard could recover, Allen had zip-tied his hands and feet with fasteners from his pocket. "Sorry," Allen said. "No time to explain better." He took the guard's communication device and security card, then activated the rest of his devices. Throughout the station, specific systems began to fail. Security doors, surveillance cameras, communication relays. Not enough to endanger anyone, just enough to create confusion. In the central security hub, Krell watched in frustration as systems crashed one after another. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Targeted power failures," said a technician. "Someone knows exactly which systems to disable." The human engineer, Krell realized, "Shut down all power to affected areas." "We can't," replied the technician. "The overrides aren't responding." In the darkness of a maintenance corridor, Alan used the guard's communication device to access the station's security frequencies. He listened to the confused chatter, pinpointing the locations of the extremist team from their panicked communications. "The human has compromised systems in Section 4, one voice said. "Move up the timeline," replied another. "Detonate now before he can interfere further." Alan checked his makeshift map. The voice had come from near the docking bay where the USS Endeavour was moored. He moved quickly, using the confusion he had created as cover. Ambassador Zex Toril, increasingly concerned by the strange pattern of failures, finally began to consider Captain Collins's warning. He ordered his personal security team to investigate the cargo bay Alan had mentioned. "Ambassador," came the report minutes later, "we found explosive residue, as the human claimed, and security logs for that time period are missing." The ambassador's expression darkened. "Find that human engineer, and contact Security Chief Krell immediately." But Krell was already on the move. Reviewing the pattern of failures, he had realized what Alan was doing, creating a path to the docking bay. He gathered his most trusted officers and headed there, determined to find out what was really happening. Alan reached the docking bay access corridor, just as a group of 5 Viridians in maintenance uniforms approached the airlock to the USS Endeavour. They carried what looked like repair equipment, but Alan could see the distinctive shapes of explosive devices inside the open cases. He needed to act now, but he was outnumbered and unarmed. He looked around quickly, scanning the corridor for anything useful. His eyes fell on the environmental control panel on the wall. The extremists reached the airlock and began attaching their devices to the seals. Once detonated, the explosives would breach the airlock and tear a hole in the Endeavour's hull, killing everyone aboard. Alan opened the control panel and modified the circuits with practiced speed. Then he activated his final power disruptor. Suddenly, the corridor's emergency systems activated. Fire suppression foam sprayed from ceiling nozzles, covering everything in thick, sticky material. Emergency lights strobed painfully bright, and a high-pitched alarm sounded directly over the airlock. The extremists, caught by surprise, stumbled in confusion. 2 dropped their equipment. Another tried to wipe the foam from his eyes. Alan rushed forward, using the chaos to his advantage. He grabbed a fallen tool, a heavy wrench, and struck the leader's hand as he tried to activate a detonator. The device fell to the floor, where Alan quickly covered it in foam. "Stop them!" shouted the leader, recognizing Alan. "The human knows." 2 extremists lunged for Alan. He ducked under the first one's grab and used the attacker's momentum to send him crashing into the wall. The second one caught Alan's arm, but Alan twisted free and kicked the Viridian's knee, sending him to the floor. Just then, Krell and his security team arrived from one end of the corridor, weapons drawn. At the same time, Lieutenant Alan appeared at the other end, having broken free during the system failures. "Drop your weapons," Krell ordered. The extremists, realizing they were caught, tried to make a final desperate move. Their leader pulled out a hidden detonator. "For the purity of the Alliance," he shouted, his finger moving to the trigger. Without hesitation, Alan threw the wrench with perfect accuracy. It hit the detonator, knocking it from the extremist's hand. In the next instant, Krell's stun weapon fired, and the leader collapsed. The remaining extremists surrendered, surrounded by security officers. Krell approached Alan cautiously. "You could have escaped in all this confusion, why didn't you?" Alan looked at the subdued extremists. "Needed to stop them. Ship in danger. People in danger. Lieutenant." Alan joined them, looking at Alan with newfound respect. How did you know about the explosives? Heard them talking, Alan said simply. Then found evidence. Ambassador Zex Toril arrived with Captain Collins. He looked at the foam-covered extremists, then at the quiet human engineer who had stopped them. It seems we owe you an apology, he said to Collins, and our thanks to your engineer. Captain Collins nodded. Alan sees things others miss, and he solves problems without making a lot of noise about it. The ambassador turned to Alan. You could have simply warned us. Why all this? He gestured at the disabled systems throughout the station. Alan shrugged slightly. Needed evidence, needed distraction, needed time. He paused. Needed you to see who really threatened the peace. As station systems gradually came back online and the extremists were taken away, Krell studied Alan with new understanding. The loud ones, he said quietly. They distract you, but it's the quiet ones you need to watch. 2 days after the failed attack, things changed on the Viridian station. Guards no longer followed the human delegation. Instead, they offered respectful nods when passing in the corridors. The humans had been moved to the diplomatic wing, with access to better quarters and communication with their ship. Alan Foster sat in a large conference room with Captain Collins, Latine Allen, and Maria Rodriguez. Across the table, Ambassador Zexa Toril and Security Chief Krell waited with 3 other high-ranking Viridians. The attackers were part of a group called the Pure Alliance, Krell explained. They believed contact with humans would corrupt our society. And how far does this group reach? Asked Captain Collins. The ambassador's face grew serious. Further than we initially thought. We have identified 27 members so far, including 3 station officials. Our investigation revealed something more troubling, added Krell. The Pure Alliance has been receiving support from outside the Viridian territories. Outside? Lieutenant Allen leaned forward. From who? The Krell Imperium, said the ambassador. Our longtime rivals. They see a potential human Viridian alliance as a threat. Maria Rodriguez looked confused. So they use these extremists to frame us and prevent an alliance? Yes, said Krell. The plan was clever. Either you would be executed as spies, or your government would respond with military force. Either outcome would prevent an alliance. What they didn't expect, said the ambassador, looking at Alan, was someone who would respond with neither anger nor surrender, but with quiet problem-solving. Alan sat silently listening. He had spent the morning fixing the systems he had disrupted during his escape, helping Viridian engineers understand what he had done and why. They had been impressed by his methods, effective but causing no permanent damage. The Krell Imperium remains a threat, continued the ambassador. Our intelligence suggests they may attempt a direct attack soon, hoping to capitalize on the confusion. Captain Collins nodded. We should contact Earth, request additional ships. There's no time, said Krell. Our long-range communications are being jammed. The Krell could arrive within days. Alan spoke for the first time. What defenses do you have? One of the Viridian officials, a military commander named Drez, answered. Automated defense grid surrounding the station and neighboring planets, energy shields, patrol vessels. But, Alan asked, hearing the concern in Drez's voice. The Krell have developed technology to disrupt our defense grid, said Drez. In their last attack on one of our outposts, they shut down all automated systems. Alan considered this. Show me the defense systems. The meeting moved to the station's defense control center. Large screens displayed the network of satellites and automated weapons surrounding the Viridian system. Alan studied them carefully, asking occasional questions about power sources and control protocols. Your system is advanced, he said finally. But what? Asked Drez. Too connected. Too dependent on central control. Alan pointed to the main control hub on the display. Krell, target this, everything fails at once. The Viridians exchanged worried glances. Can we protect it better? Asked Krell. Alan shook his head. Different approach needed. He turned to Captain Collins. Request permission to work with Viridian engineers. Have an idea. Collins nodded. Whatever you need, Alan. For the next 3 days, Alan worked nearly non-stop with a team of Viridian engineers. They were puzzled at first by his approach, which seemed primitive compared to their advanced technology. He was building simple, independent control systems using basic components. Why not use quantum relays? Asked one engineer, watching Alan connect old-fashioned circuit boards. Too sophisticated, Alan replied. Krell expect that, looking for complex systems to disrupt. He designed standalone control units for each defense satellite. Simple, rugged devices that would operate even if the main system failed. The Viridians began to understand his strategy. When sophisticated technology was vulnerable, sometimes the solution was to take a step backward. On the 4th day, long-range sensors detected Krell ships approaching. 3 large warships with multiple support vessels, a serious attack force. The station went on high alert. Captain Collins offered the USS Endeavour to help in the defense, but the ambassador was hesitant. Your ship is impressive but not designed for combat against Krell vessels, he said. We cannot ask you to risk yourselves in our conflict. We're already involved, Collins replied firmly. The Krell targeted us too, remember? While they discussed strategy, Alan continued working. He had joined his simple control units to an old Viridian technology, a mechanical signal system that used light pulses rather than digital communication. The Krell disruptors would have no effect on it. It's ready, he said finally, entering the command center where the leaders had gathered. Commander Dres looked skeptical. You want us to defend against a Krell fleet with this primitive technology? Not primitive, Alan corrected quietly. Independent. Resilient. The Viridian military leaders argued briefly, but time was short. The Krell fleet would arrive within hours. They agreed to implement Alan's system alongside their regular defenses. Technicians hurried to install the backup controllers on key defense satellites. Alan worked with them via communication channels, explaining the simple but effective modifications. As they finished the preparations, Krell approached Alan. The Pure Alliance extremists we captured told us something interesting, he said. They were specifically warned about loud, aggressive humans. They were told how to manipulate human anger and pride. He paused. But they were never warned about quiet humans who observe and adapt. Alan nodded slightly. Most overlooked the quiet ones. The station shuddered as the first Krell ships arrived, immediately launching attacks on the outer defense perimeter. On the main screen, everyone could see the Krell fleet approaching, sleek, dark vessels with powerful weapons already firing. They're broadcasting a signal, reported a Viridian technician. It's the disruption field. Throughout the defense grid, automated systems began to fail. Satellites went dark, control interfaces flickered and died. The main defense computers crashed with warning alarms. Commander Dres looked grim. Just like the outpost attack, we've lost all automated defenses. But then, something unexpected happened. On the tactical display, defense satellites that had gone dark began to reactivate one by one. Not with their full functionality, but with enough to target and fire on Krell ships. The backup systems are working, said the technician, surprised. The independent controllers are immune to the disruption field. The Krell commanders, expecting an easy approach after deploying their disruptor technology, suddenly faced resistance. From defense weapons they thought they had neutralized. Their formation broke as they took evasive action. They're confused, said Krell, watching the tactical display. They don't understand why their disruption field isn't working. Alan stood quietly, watching the battle unfold. His simple solution was working. Not perfectly, but enough to give the Viridians a fighting chance. The USS Endeavour joined the battle, adding its firepower to the defense. Lieutenant Allen coordinated with Viridian vessels, creating a coordinated attack pattern that split the Krell formation further. After an hour of unexpected resistance, the Krell fleet commander ordered a retreat. Their carefully planned attack had failed against a defense they hadn't anticipated, one too simple to be disrupted by their advanced technology. As the Krell ships disappeared into the darkness of space, The command center erupted in cheers. Commander Drez approached Alan with newfound respect. "You saved us with technology centuries behind what we normally use," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "How did you know it would work?" Alan shrugged slightly. "Sometimes the oldest solutions are the best. Simple, reliable, hard to break." Ambassador Zexatoral looked thoughtfully at the quiet engineer. "The Krell will return better prepared next time. But now we understand something important about humans." He glanced at Captain Collins and Lieutenant Allen, then back to Alan. "The most valuable ones aren't always those who speak the loudest." 6 months passed since the Krell attack. The Viridian space station had changed. Now it bustled with both Viridian and human activity. The USS Endeavour had returned to Earth with news of the new alliance, and other human ships had arrived to strengthen the partnership. Alan Foster walked down a corridor that now featured both Viridian and human design elements. Engineers from both species worked side by side, combining their different approaches to create new technologies. He had been asked to stay behind as the human technical liaison, while Captain Collins handled diplomatic matters back on Earth. He entered a large workshop where his latest project was underway. Inside, human and Viridian engineers crowded around, tables covered with components from both civilizations. They were building hybrid systems that combined Viridian advanced technology with human practical designs. Alan, good timing, called Ren, a young Viridian engineer who had become Alan's most enthusiastic student. "We just finished the integrated power module. Want to see it tested?" Alan nodded and joined the group. The device on the table was beautiful. In its complexity and simplicity, Viridian quantum technology housed in a rugged human-designed casing with multiple backup systems. "Ready?" asked Ren. The others stepped back as he activated the device. It hummed to life, energy readings stable and strong. "Perfect integration," said Alan with a small smile. It was one of dozens of projects that combined the best of both species' approaches. After the successful defense against the Krell, the Viridian High Council had realized something important. Despite having technology centuries ahead of humans, they had become vulnerable by relying too heavily on complex solutions. Humans, with their shorter history of technological development, still remembered how to solve problems with simpler, more robust methods. Alan's communicator beeped. "Engineer Foster," came Krell's voice. "The High Council meeting will begin soon. Your presence is requested." "On my way," Alan replied. As he left the workshop, engineers from both species nodded respectfully. His quiet competence had earned him a unique position of trust. The High Council chamber was a grand room with soaring ceilings and seats arranged in a circle. Representatives from all 5 Viridian species sat in their designated places. Ambassador Zexatoral presided at the center. Humans from various ships and diplomatic teams occupied seats that had been added for them. Alan took his place quietly, noting who was present and who wasn't. His habit of careful observation had not changed. "The Council is now in session," announced the ambassador. "Our first matter, the report on Krell activity along our borders." Commander Drez stood. "The Krell have withdrawn to their territory and reinforced their defenses. Our intelligence suggests they were surprised by our alliance with humans and are reassessing their strategy. They expected us to be enemies, not allies," added Krell. "Their attempt to turn us against each other had the opposite effect." The discussion continued, covering security measures and diplomatic efforts. Then, Ambassador Zexatoral turned to the most significant item on the agenda. "Now to the matter of the exchange program," he said. "Engineer Foster, please present your proposal." Alan stood and walked to the center of the chamber. Public speaking had never been his favorite activity, but over the months, he had grown more comfortable with it. Still, he kept his presentation simple and direct. "Proposal is this," he began. "Exchange of engineers and scientists between our peoples. Viridians to learn human practical approaches. Humans to learn Viridian advanced theory. 10 from each side to start, working in mixed teams." He displayed images of the projects already underway, the hybrid technologies that combined Viridian sophistication with human reliability. "Results already promising," he continued. Viridian quantum computing with human redundancy systems, human medical techniques with Viridian biotechnology. The council members nodded in approval. The early collaborations had produced impressive results, technologies that neither species could have created alone. But most important, Alan said, his quiet voice somehow filling the chamber, is the exchange of thinking. Different approaches to the same problems. Viridians think in complex, elegant solutions. Humans think in practical, adaptable ones. And your selection process for participants? Asked a Viridian counselor. Not just the most brilliant, Alan replied, but those who listen, who adapt, who respect different approaches. The council voted unanimously to approve the exchange program. It would become the foundation of the Human Viridian Alliance, spreading to include other fields beyond engineering, medicine, agriculture, education, art. After the meeting, Ambassador Zextoral approached Alan. "You've changed our perspective on humans," he said, "and on ourselves as well." Alan raised an eyebrow questioningly. "We had grown too confident in our advanced technology," explained the ambassador. "Too dismissive of simpler solutions. You reminded us that sometimes the old ways are still valuable." They walked together to an observation deck overlooking the stars. Through the large window they could see ships from both civilizations moving around the station. "The Krell made a fundamental error in their strategy," continued the ambassador. "They studied your Captain Collins, your Lieutenant Allen, your diplomatic corps. They prepared countermeasures for loud, assertive humans. But not for the quiet ones," Allen finished. "Exactly. They didn't understand that human strength comes in many forms." The ambassador paused. "My species has a saying, 'The still waters run deepest.' I think it applies well to you, Alan Foster." A group of young engineers, both human and Viridian, entered the observation deck. They spotted Alan and approached eagerly, asking questions about a new project. He answered patiently, guiding rather than instructing. The ambassador watched with approval. "You know, when I first reported to my government about humans, I described your species as energetic, emotional, and sometimes impulsive. I had to send a correction later." "What did you tell them?" asked Alan. "That humans are diverse in their strengths, that some lead with words and presence, others with quiet action, and that the most dangerous human is not always the one making threats or demands. The quiet one," Alan said with a small smile. "The one who watches, listens, and solves problems without announcing every step." The ambassador gestured to the mixed group of engineers. "They're learning that from you." 1 year after first contact, the Human Viridian Alliance had transformed the political landscape of that section of the galaxy. 3 other species had approached the Alliance seeking membership, impressed by how the combined strengths had repelled the Krell threat. As Alan stood on the observation deck later that night, watching the stars, he reflected on how a simple approach had changed so much. The Krell had tried to exploit human anger and pride, expecting loud threats and aggressive posturing. They hadn't prepared for a quiet engineer who observed before acting. Alan joined him at the window. "Communications from Earth," he said. "The exchange program is being implemented across all human colonies. They're calling it the Foster Initiative." Alan looked uncomfortable with the attention. Alan chuckled. "Don't worry, most people will forget it was named after you in a few years, but they won't forget the lesson." He clapped Alan on the shoulder. "Sometimes the quiet ones change the world more than those making all the noise." Alan nodded slightly, his gaze returning to the stars. Beyond the window, human and Viridian ships moved in coordinated patterns, different but complementary. Like their civilizations, each with their own strengths now working together, the quiet human smiled. Sometimes the most important statement was made without saying a word at all.